Now when you're planting these, you'll see some people like to plant them on their side like this. So they'll make a little furrow, lay them down in that furrow, and just kind of poke these leaves up out of the soil. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Wednesday, May 22nd here in South Georgia, and on today's video we're going to have a little sweet tater time and a little tater time. So we're going to get these sweet potato plants, put in a couple of these raised beds behind me. I'm going to tell you why these are the perfect thing to grow in your raised beds during the hot summer months. And then I'm going to get my boys out here, see if I can get them to dig a row of these huckleberry gold taters over there in our in-ground plot. But before we get started on some tater stuff, a few updates with some things going on in the raised bed garden here. I did get Titus to pull the rest of those purple carrots out of this bed a couple days ago. Most of those had gotten kind of woody and split, so we ended up feeding those to the chickens. Anyways, got that cleaned up, got some marigold transplants in there that should add some nice beauty to the front of the raised bed plot. Speaking of beauty, these zinnias are really showing out, starting to put on blooms, but we do have to do a little bit of maintenance on these, otherwise they'll get too tall and start falling over on us. So even though these first blooms are really pretty and we're glad to see them, cutting these back in the beginning is going to do these plants a lot of good, especially in this raised bed here. Keep them getting so tall and make them be a little more bushy. So what we want to do with these blooms here is we want to follow them down all the way down to where it splits off there, and then we want to make our cut. Just want to do this with all these, just follow it all the way down. Some of these stems may be longer than others, and we just want to give these a nice pruning, and it's going to force these plants to spread out a little bit more as opposed to getting taller. So keep those zinnias pruned, you'll be glad you did, and you'll have you a nice little arrangement for the kitchen table. And then right here in this last round bed, our softneck garlic probably needs to be harvested pretty soon. I think it's about done growing. Those leaves have yellowed up quite a bit. Plants are starting to die back, so we'll probably pull that within the next week. Right behind that, I want to show you our Egyptian walking onions. They're looking pretty decent, but no walking yet. So a lot of these have multiplied significantly at the base of the plant. Still haven't gotten those little bulbils at the top that fall over and make these things walk around. I'm guessing we'll get them pretty soon, but haven't yet. And then last time we were out here, we dug some potatoes from these two long skinny beds, and as you can see, these things are pretty clean and ready to go. We might need to smooth out that soil a little bit before we plant our sweet potato plants. We're not gonna have to do a whole lot. Now the upsides to living in a warmer climate are that we can plant earlier than most people, and we can pretty much grow some type of food year round. The downsides to living in a warmer climate is that it does get too hot some months of the year to grow much around here. So whereas those of you that maybe live in the middle of the country or northern part of the country, you take your gardening break maybe during the winter months, our gardening break or our slow down time is during the really hot summer months, say July, August, and September. Now I have found that if I feed the snot out of something, say for instance some cucumbers, I can push them on into late July, early August sometimes. Can't do it every year, but I have done it a few times. For the most part though, those really hot months, there's not a whole lot that will grow out here in South Georgia. There are a few things that will do pretty well. Peppers usually continue producing pretty well for us as long as we keep water on those plants. Eggplants are another thing that tend to do okay during the summer months. I'm not a big eggplant fan, so I don't even have any planted out here right now. Okra is another thing that does really well during the heat of summer, and I need to get some okra planted, by the way. Cover crops, warm season cover crops is another thing we use just to keep our soil from being bare during the hot summer months. And then we have sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes absolutely love the heat and thrive in the heat. Now I mentioned cover crops, which are a great thing to plant in the middle of the summer to keep your garden from being overwhelmed with weeds, especially if it gets just so hot unbearable. You don't even want to be out there. Sweet potatoes here can also kind of double as a cover crop. Now you're not going to get a lot of the soil benefits from sweet potatoes that you might get with a warm season cover crop, but they will cover the ground very, very effectively and suppress a lot of weed growth. So it always breaks my heart to see people letting their gardens go come July, come August, and they've got a weedy mess out there, and I think, man, they should have just threw some sweet potato slips out there, let those cover the ground, and they wouldn't be adding to their weed seed bank so much. So these things are a great way to just cover your garden soil, and you'll also get some food from it. And the same thing applies for containers or raised beds. Don't let that soil just sit out there and bake and get weedy over the summer. Put some sweet potato plants in there, let them cover that soil. These things are pretty maintenance free. They do require some watering, but they're not extra thirsty, so you don't have to do a whole lot to just keep them going. Now it's important to note that you probably just don't want to plant any sweet potato variety in a container or a raised bed. Some people will go to the grocery store, just buy some sweet potatoes, let them start sprouting plants, pluck those off and plant them, but you don't really know what variety you're planting when you do that. So traditional sweet potato varieties produce these long trailing vines, and they'll just run all over the place. That's what makes them so great for an in-ground plot, because they cover the soil so fast. But you may not want that with your containers or raised beds, because these things will be crawling into other beds and you'll end up with a mess. So there are a couple varieties that are specifically designed for containers or raised beds. They're called vineless varieties. Now they do crawl a little bit, but not near as much as the traditional varieties. The one we have here today we're going to be planting is called Bunch Puerto Rico. It's not spelled like the Puerto Rico that's south of us. It's P-O-R-T-O. And I've grown this one before, grown it in some of those raised beds before. It's done very well for us. There is another vineless variety on Steel Plant Company's website called Varieties, and the main difference between those two, besides a little bit of a color difference in the sweet potatoes, this Bunch Puerto Rico is a longer maturing variety. So I think this one takes around 120 days, whereas Varieties takes about 110 days. All right, let's do some planting. As I mentioned earlier, not a whole lot of prep to do these beds. The soil is in pretty good shape here. Might need to smooth it out just a little bit. I am going to add a little bit of fertility here. I don't want a ton of fertility in these beds for the sweet potatoes, but I am going to put down a little bit of coop grow here. Just going to sprinkle that over the bed there. Just, I don't know, 4 or 5 handfuls. One of these long skinny beds like this. Now when we're planting sweet potatoes in the in-ground garden, I do like to make a little mound or a hill to put my plants in, give some nice soft dirt for those sweet potatoes to form. But in these raised beds, all this soil here is really nice and soft and fluffy, so we don't necessarily need to make a mound in these raised beds. And I'm not going to add any drip tape or drip tubing in here today. I may come back later and run some lines alongside these plants. Haven't made up my mind yet. Today we're just going to get these planted. Now last year when I grew these in one of these long skinny beds, I just planted one row of plants right down the center there and did pretty well. But I've got enough plants here, and I think I can get away with 2 rows in here. Really pack these things in here tight. So I'm going to do a row here and a row there. So I've got my plants out of the jar here. These look nice and perky after sitting in that water for a few days. I always like to do that before I plant them. I don't want to put any kind of wilted looking sweet potato plants in the ground. So we're going to kind of tease these apart here if we can and space them out a little bit. And I usually like to put these about, I don't know, 10 to 12 inches apart. So we'll see how far we get with the plants we have here. Oh yeah, we're going to have plenty of plants here. Got these laid out about 12 inches apart, 2 rows, and I've got the rows staggered a little bit there. Still got this many plants for the second bed. I think this was a bundle of 25 plants or so. So we've got plenty. Now when you're planting these, you'll see some people like to plant them on their side like this. So they'll make a little furrow, lay them down in that furrow, and just kind of poke these leaves up out of the soil. That works well. You can do it that way. We could certainly do that in here, but a lot of times I'll just make me kind of a deep hole here and just push those puppies down in there like that right there. So there's one in the ground, and then we'll get the rest of these planted here in this bed. All right, so we got those packed in there pretty tight, maybe a little too tight, I don't know. Might end up getting some slightly smaller than average sweet potatoes, but that'll be all right because we tend to fry most of ours instead of baking them, so I don't mind if they're a little bit on the smaller side. And so now we just need to do the exact same thing with this bed. And there we go, got them both planted. Sweet potatoes are probably one of the easiest and fastest things to plant in a backyard garden. Now I will want to come in here in a minute and give these some overhead water, just kind of moisten up that soil a little bit, keep these things from wilting in the sun today. When you've got them planted in containers or raised beds like this, you will want to baby them a little bit for that first week or so until they get roots established in that soil. Not as big of an issue in an in-ground plot, but in containers or raised beds where the soil dries out faster, baby them a little bit in the beginning. And if those produce like they should produce, that's going to be a ton of groceries out of those 2 skinny raised beds. We've already harvested about 40 pounds of taters out of those beds. A week or so ago, we were able to add 40 pounds of sweet taters to that later this year. Man, that's some good groceries. And speaking of taters, we need to dig some more today. So we did pretty good in the raised beds. Time to see how we did with at least one of these in-ground rows here. Our Baltic rows on the end still looks pretty good. Not gonna dig those today. And the Sharpo mirror on the other end still hanging in there. But these huckleberry golds in this center row here, they've died back enough. It's time to dig those. All right, boys, we're just gonna dig this middle row here today, okay? You see that one? The one in the middle looks dead, just that one. Don't pull any of those other plants, 'cause I got something going on there, okay? I cleared out some of those weeds so y'all can see where it is. You each got a bucket, okay? Titus, you start on the beginning of the row. Bubby, you start on the end. Let's see who can fill up their bucket the most. You got to get down in there good, okay? What'd you say?
One of the plants has 7 taters.
Titus says he got one had 8 taters. You better step it up. Oh, 9 now. It keeps growing. Titus liable to tell a story on us down there if you don't watch him. Some good soft tater dirt right there. We don't need a shovel or nothing.
Here we go. Oh, that'll go.
There we go. We did all right with these this year, didn't we?
Yeah.
How we doing, Ty-Ty? Good? Why don't you get that bucket closer to you so you don't have to play basketball?
That one plant had like 20 taters.
Oh, now, come on now. I think you might be pulling my leg. I ain't never seen 20 taters on one plant. You ain't even got 20 taters in your bucket right there, Ty-Ty. What you talking about? You think you gonna fill up your bucket? Oh, you might get it full. All right, boys, how did we do?
Good.
Did good. Y'all did pretty good there. I think we got close to our 40 to 50 pounds we want to get our 8 to 10 times multiple there. How heavy is that, Ty-Ty? About 20, 25 pounds? All right, good job, thank y'all. So I ain't mad about that right there at all. We got some nice size huckleberry golds in there. I'll take that right there any day of the week. And that, my friends, is a good omen for what we're gonna have going on with these Baltic rows in another week or two when we dig those. And same thing with our Sharpo mirrors over there. If we get this kind of production from an earlier variety like huckleberry gold, we should get some bang up production from those Sharpo mirrors there, which are a little later. So a nice productive morning in the garden today. Nice to see some of our hard work from the spring starting to pay off. And I tell you what, those boys have gotten pretty dang good at digging taters. I went back down that row and checked, and I didn't find a single one that they missed. They got them all out of there. Now they've had some practice. They've been doing it quite a few years, but every year they get a little bit better, and they knocked that 30-foot row out in no time. So good to have some good help. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. I'll put a link in the description below where we got those sweet potato plants. Just remember that they usually stop shipping around early June, so you don't have long to make up your mind on those. And if you want to know our secrets to getting some nice tater production like this, watch this video that we did a few weeks back. We'll mention 3 good tips for solid tater production, including watering well in that last month or so. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.